Give me a training camp battle that you're keeping an eye on that could have some major fantasy implications.
I mean, a pretty obvious one here has to be the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, we're already starting to hear a little bit about them just recently as training camp and rookie camps are opening up here. But the battle between what's going on with Sky Moore and everyone, the recent hype on him, I'm hearing a lot more hype on him. Everyone is loving Kadarius Toney and the potential that he has to offer for this offense. And Rishi Rice, who hasn't had a good start to rookie training camp, but he has a ton of potential as well. So any one of these guys could step up and take that Juju Smith-Schuster role or the second pass catcher behind Travis Kelce. And we saw Juju, have at times when he was healthy, decent success. So if any one of these guys can step up and be that number 2 option for this team here, it's big fantasy success moving forward for one of them.
Yeah, because this team really has been, missing. They missed that Tyreek type player last year. Now, none of these guys are going to be able to truly be a 1-for-1 replacement for him.
Of course.
But somebody easily could be a replacement for Juju. I don't think Juju's this elite specimen that somebody couldn't fill that role very nicely and maybe even improve upon it. Now, if you had one guy out of this group that you would more so like to target than the others in your drafts, is there a guy that you're leaning toward?
Probably in terms of just overall value, probably Sky Moore. I think Kadarius Toney is going too high in a general sense for me, but I feel like Sky Moore is going pretty low overall, especially in like startups or anything like that. Or I think you could get him still relatively cheap. And I know I liked the limited time he had last year on the offense, and I feel like if he can expand that role and maybe take over the slot, I mean, there's a reason why he was picked in rookie drafts in the first round and whatnot last year. He's an exciting player, and he can flash with his speed. So he's definitely a guy I'm looking towards trying to get, or at least in general, keeping my eye on a lot more than most of the other ones.
Yeah. So for me, one of the battles that I want to see is it's similar to the Chiefs in the sense of, who's really going to emerge from this group. But I'm watching the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans have tons of wide receivers, but we really don't have any clear indicator as to who's going to step up. Now, we know that Robert Woods is like the veteran presence there. So we know that he's going to be on the field to a certain extent, but who else is going to be out there? They drafted Tank Dell this year. They drafted John Mechie last year. They drafted Nico Collins the year before. A deep dive guy that I like is Xavier Hutchinson. I almost said Henderson. Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State. So there's a lot of really interesting names in that group. And honestly, like I tend to lean toward the guys that were drafted this year for dynasty purposes, because anytime you have a regime change, you never know how they're going to feel about the holdovers. Sometimes those guys stick and they're great and they're just fine. But more often than not, when there's a new GM, when there's a new coach, when there's a whole new, crew in town, they have their certain guys that they want to get touches. They have their certain guys that they want to get on the field. So I'm specifically watching Hutchinson and Tank Dell, even though I think the other two guys might be more talented. I think those two guys are going to have a really interesting shot at some point in the year. We'll have to see if that's early or not. I think Tank Dell has the better shot at the early. Hutchinson, it might be a little bit later with him being such a late draft pick. He's going to have to really earn his way onto the field, but I think that one's a pretty interesting one. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do like that one. I mean, I don't know if more than one will be fantasy relevant for us this year. I mean, it will depend on how CJ Stroud, progresses during this training camp here, and if he is really the real deal. I like John Mechie still. I liked him as a kind of like a move the chains kind of wide receiver. And, everything that happened to him last year, just so unfortunate. But I'm really hoping that he can kind of bounce back, because I feel like he has the size and build to be an NFL wide receiver. And, if it wasn't to everything that happened last year and even the injury before that, he could have potentially have been like a first-round pick in the NFL draft if things went his way. But unfortunately, it didn't. But I'm excited to see what he's able to do this coming season. So,
all right, give me your next training camp battle that you're keeping an eye on.
Oh, it's got to be the Bears running backs. I'm hearing a lot of different things about the Bears situation here. Obviously, Khalil Herbert is likely going to go in as the RB1, likely. he was the guy who's been there the longest, even though we have a whole new regime now. But, he knows the players. He knows some of the, just the players in general sense. But then they brought in Deontay Foreman. They drafted Roshan Johnson. I'm excited to see who steps up and takes over, because each one of them has a great positivity about them. Herbert has been fantastic as a runner so far, very efficient on the ground. Deontay Foreman is a nice bounce back career to his game in the last 2 seasons now, and has another opportunity to be a starting guy again. And then obviously Roshan Johnson, a guy with unlimited potential with minimal usage on his career coming into the NFL. And he has probably the best opportunity to be the passing downs back on his team, because I think he fits that skill set. So I'm interested to see who comes out week 1. I feel like it's not going to be Roshan Johnson. It's going to probably be one of the other two, but I wouldn't be surprised, obviously, by midseason if Roshan takes over this backfield. But it'd be nice if he did beforehand. So
I'm in the same boat. I'm a big fan of Roshan. I really liked his game. Really liked what I saw on tape. He was a player where there wasn't that one thing that you're like, oh my goodness, that skill is elite. But he had so many of them where you're like, oh man, he's pretty good at that. Oh man, he's pretty good at that. Oh man, he's pretty good at that. He's just a very solid all around back. So I have a hard time knowing for sure what they're going to do. But I have a really strong feeling that at some point this season, they're going to let Roshan see what he can do as the featured back. You're right. I don't know that it's going to be out of the gate. I think they're going to favor the veterans early on. And part of it might depend on where this team is at. This is a team that was obviously not good last year. They earned the first overall pick, but it's a team that filled a lot of holes in the offseason. They're now in the second year with the same system for their quarterback, 3rd year overall with that quarterback. So I'm really curious to see that team kind of come together this year. But you picked a backfield. I had another backfield, and actually Mr. Bakes a Lot called both of these. He finds these as interesting position battles as well. I'm going with the Philly backfield. I have no idea how they're going to make all of this work. They have already been one of the more maddening backfields to try to evaluate in the past. And now in Philly, we've got them trading for DeAndre Swift, which leads me to believe he's the most recent acquisition. Anytime you're trading for a player, you're giving up assets. It's not just like, we signed this guy because we needed depth or what. Like, no, they gave up assets to go out and get DeAndre Swift. And it feels like he fits their mold pretty well. That high-paced offense, like I feel like he would be a great asset there with Hurts. But Penny's no slouch. Penny's a legit player, and especially when he's healthy. And that's always been the issue with him. When he's been healthy, he's been really freaking good. Yeah. He just hasn't been healthy very much, and that's the tough part about Rashad Penny. But then waiting in the wings, Kenneth Gainwell has done nothing but be consistently a solid player for them. And so how is all this going to work? And is during the Giants week, are we going to see Boston freaking Scott again? Like, who knows? So that's one where I'm hoping, between the beat reporters and just all of the different things coming out, I hope we get some sort of clarity on what their plan is. If I had to guess today, I'm guessing that they're going to be using Penny a lot between the tackles, first and second down work. But Swift is going to spell him at times, but he's going to be the main passing down back, is kind of my read on the situation. Do you read it similar or no?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of do. This backfield, I feel like, is just going to be a headache all season long, because I feel like there's so much potential on both these running backs. And even if you add in Kenny Gainwell there, I mean, it's like we're going to be so focused on the first two, but their injury history is like, oh, well, before midseason, Kenny Gainwell is going to be the guy there. But everyone's going to be so focused on these two and how they get used in this offense here, because they're both very efficient when they have the ball in their hands. But again, they just haven't been on the field too often for us.
Yeah, no, it's been tricky. All right, give me one more that you're keeping an eye on. One more training camp battle that you're kind of wanting to see how things shake out.
Yeah, I'm probably going to go back to wide receiver here now and go with the Panthers wide receiver core. I mean, you have Adam Thielen, you have another veteran in DJ Shark, you have another veteran player in Terrence Marshall, and of course you have the rookie pick in the second round, Jonathan Mingo. So I'd like to see who ends up emerging from this offense here. Again, I don't know how well this offense is going to be in year one with Bryce Young, but you have Adam Thielen, who's over the age of 32, 33 years old now. It's hard to imagine that he's going to probably be a day one starter, but it's hard to imagine that, him playing the entire season. So someone else is going to have to step up. So, I liked DJ Shark last year. He kind of, at the end of the season, had a little bit of a kick to his game for fantasy. You have Terrence Marshall, who I wasn't a big fan of, but people seem to like him, and he kind of fits that profile of an NFL wide receiver. And then Jonathan Mingo has tremendous upside in his game there if he can kind of put it all together. So I really want to see who emerges as the starting two next to Adam Thielen, because Adam Thielen is likely going to be the day one starter. But other three young players, I'd like to see who steps up and ends up being in that three wide receiver sets early on.
Yeah, I'm a big Jonathan Mingo guy. I'm trying to remember where I had him pre-draft. I want to say he was my wide receiver 4 pre-draft.
You had him pretty early, I remember.
yeah, I had him pretty high, and I liked a lot of what I saw. Obviously, he was a guy that was more of a traits guy more than a guy that compiled a lot of numbers and stats and things like that. But I would always much rather lean on the traits than the production. So I'm rooting for that kid, and you love it when you get a young receiver and a young quarterback in at the same time. They have time to develop together. Hopefully that's what will happen in this scenario. So for my last one, I took a little bit of a layup in a sense, because this is a training camp battle, but it also there's some injury things kind of weaved into this as well. So it's the whole Trey Lance, Brock Purdy thing. This has huge fantasy implications because Trey Lance, they moved heaven and earth to move up and acquire this guy. He has tons of physical potential, but in the very, very small sample size that we've seen, he hasn't looked very good. Now, Brock Purdy has also had his own injury issue that he's been dealing with all offseason. But during his time, he looked great. He did. You could argue that maybe this team is in the Super Bowl instead of the Eagles if he stays healthy in that game. Now, I still think the Eagles probably would have won that one, but it's definitely in the realm of possibility that they could have been a Super Bowl team had Brock Purdy stayed healthy. Now, they've said, from everything they've said, it really sounds like they believe Brock Purdy is their guy. But what happens if it takes them until week 4 to start? And then Trey Lance plays really well those first 3 games. And, it's this whole thing. And the reason that I felt like this was kind of cheating a little bit is I don't think we're going to get any real clarity in training camp. It's a training camp battle in the sense of we don't know who the quarterback is going to be, but it's not going to be solved in training camp. It's going to be solved once the regular season starts. So I'm a little leery, a little curious as to how all of that's going to play out. Do you have any read on that?
Yeah, I think what you're thinking is that it's like the race of who's the healthiest by week 1. I feel like that's what the battle is. Who's going to be the healthiest and start week 1? Because like Brock Purdy, I feel like you just keep hearing he's the starter. He's our starter. He's our starter. If he's healthy, he's going to play. But if he's not healthy and they have to take that gamble and put Trey Lance out there, who apparently is looking better in terms of passing, if he goes out there and actually does well, they have a situation. And I don't think they want to get into that situation. They want Brock Purdy to be the day one starter. I feel like at this point, they've seen Brock Purdy mesh well with this offense. And like you said, they could have been in the Super Bowl. So I think Brock Purdy does get the day one start as long as he's healthy, but I don't think they want to throw Trey Lance out there at this point because they don't want to know what if anymore. I think they want to move on at this point. So,
yeah, it's definitely a very different age as far as quarterback goes because, back in the day, once a guy was drafted, that's their guy, and they're going to be developing for the next 5 years. Not anymore. Not anymore. You've got a short shelf life. You better produce, or we're on to the next one.
Absolutely. Yeah, Josh Rosen. Come on. 1 year.
Josh Rosen, exactly.
Gone.
See you later. All right. Well, any others that you wanted to touch on real quick, or are you good?
Just real quick, I guess the Seattle backfield, I'd like to see how that goes and see who ends up being the day one starter. Obviously, it seems like Kenneth Walker is going to be that guy, but if Zach Charbonnet comes out in training camp and just lights up everything possible, it could be a real situation where, I feel like they're going to be both used very heavily, but whoever is actually the real starter, I feel like that's the guy you're going to want early on in your season. So
yeah, the touches, how they divvy up the touches are going to be really interesting, because I do feel like Kenneth Walker is going to get a larger workload, but I wonder if Charbonnet is going to get the more valuable touches, the receptions and the goal line stuff. And that's what will make this whole thing really, really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. Well, Coach Stephen P., tell the folks where they can find you on Twitter. I just basically gave it away, but tell the great folks where they can find you on Twitter. And, what are you working on? What are you doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, Coach Stephen P on Twitter. You can find me there. Ask me any questions. Things I'm doing right now. Obviously, I'm working with Dynasty Nerds and writing articles for you guys and whatnot. I know I just released a couple team forecast articles, the Titans, the Saints. I have the Dolphins to do next week. I'm also doing some video recordings for my podcast, The Fantasy Coaches, some kind of player outlook for 2023 on YouTube. They're about like 2-3 minute videos. They're really fun. I've gotten through like 15 or 20 of them already, and hoping to get to close to like 75 by the end of the year. So that's over on our YouTube channel. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun. Little short segments. So they're really informational. So go check them out. So I appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we will absolutely have you back again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gary. I appreciate the invite. So